She pointed at me in a packed emergency room and said loud enough for the monitors to flinch, "Don't let that man touch me." Everyone knew what she meant. I froze with a chart in my hand and 10 years of training in my bones, and for a beat, the whole room held its breath like a choir waiting for the downbeat. If it were you, what would you have done? My name's Dr. Carter Reed. I work trauma at Harbor City Medical Center. Fluorescent lights, coffee that tastes like a dare, the beep that never sleeps. That's home base. That night, a woman in a ripped silk blouse lay on a gurney, auburn hair stuck to her forehead. Fiancé standing there, smelling like expensive cologne and cheap courage. She looked right through me like I was a smudge on the lens and said again, quieter but sharper, "I want someone like me." You know what I mean? My attending, Dr. Elena Morales, stepped in. Steady voice, eyes that can cut glass. "Dr. Reed is one of our best." The fiancé smirked like he'd won something. I stepped back because sometimes the right move is the one that hurts. My buddy Sam slid into position, professional as ever. It should have ended there. Ugly moment, smooth handoff, carry on. But something in the scans didn't sit right with me. First pass said stable. My gut said wait. Here's the thing about trauma. Your eyes learn to see shadows where trouble hides. I caught a whisper of blood along the spleen line, not a scream, a murmur. That's time-sensitive. Elena and I made eye contact, that half-millimeter head tilt we use when the room is too loud for words. And suddenly, the clock got louder. We prepped fast. The anesthesiologist fitted the mask. The woman looked at me as the meds pulled her under and tried to say something. Maybe. Then she was gone to that deep quiet where all the noise is ours. I cut. We found the bleed controlled, it stitched life back into place, one deliberate move at a time. If you're picturing heroics, don't. It was just work done correctly by a team that trusts one another, hands steady, even when your chest remembers a sentence you didn't deserve. 4 hours later, we closed. She lived. Because that's the job. In recovery, the room looked softer. The fiancé had evaporated. That happens. And the monitors were singing that sleepy lullaby only nurses appreciate. She woke, slow eyes sliding into focus, saw me, then saw herself seeing me, and something fell in her face like a bird hitting glass. "Why did you?" she rasped, throat raw from the tube. I knew the question. "Why did you save me after I tried to shrink you down to a stereotype?" "Because I'm your doctor," I said. "That's the job. A single tear. Not an Oscar tear, a human one." Yeah, that happened. Her name I learned later was Avery Vaughn. Uptown marketing firm, the kind of life that photographs well. 3 weeks from a wedding to a guy named Preston, who had a handshake like a real estate pitch. You know the type. 2 days after surgery, I picked up her chart for a follow-up. Elena looked at me. "You good?" "Define good." I went anyway. In exam room 12, she sat straight, too straight, like posture could change facts. "Pain level?" I asked. "Manageable," she said, then, right on its heels, I was wrong. No bow on it, no excuses, just a sentence that sounded like it cost money to say. She told me the rest. Preston laughing in the waiting room, her parents with the soft voices and hard opinions, the realization that she didn't like the person she'd been trained to be. If it were you, would you accept that apology? I didn't hand out grace like candy. I checked the incision, I gave precautions, I scheduled a follow-up. But something stuck. A week later, I walked into Eastside Hope, the free clinic where I volunteer Saturdays, and there she was, behind the front desk in fresh scrubs with the fold lines still visible. Mrs. Thelma Briggs, clinic director, hallway legend, human metronome. announced Dr. Reed, meet your new file clerk. Thelma doesn't whisper. I watched Avery the way you watch a fire pit at a backyard party, close enough to feel the heat, far enough not to catch. Waiting for the performance, waiting for the Instagram post. It didn't come. Instead, she showed up. Week after week. The ring disappeared. The phone stayed face down. She traded heels for sneakers, learned enough Spanish to ask name, pain medicine, family. Verbs messy, effort honest. She folded sheets with Nurse Keisha, learned to tape IV lines without making a spaghetti bowl, held a baby so Mama could sign paperwork. In the supply closet where I hide some Saturdays when I need a breath that isn't hospital air, she looked at me and said, "Do you hate me?" I said. "I don't know you enough to hate you. I hated who you were that night." She nodded like she'd already told herself that in worse words. "Would you teach me I can't teach you?" I said. "I can choose in front of you." Pattern interrupt silence. The good kind. Now here's where it turns. Because in stories like this, folks want a clean moral and a group hug. And then life walks in with muddy boots. One Thursday evening, Avery showed up at my apartment door, street clothes that still looked expensive, even when she wasn't trying. She held a rumor in both hands like it was proof. Her parents, she said, had called to warn her. I was writing a research paper about implicit bias. She was my case study. I'd been asking around for details to turn her worst moment into my career ladder. "You used me," she said, voice steady with that particular cold that hits behind your eyes, "and I let you. If it were you, what would you have done?" Here's the twist. There is a paper. I've been working on it for 2 years. Numbers, outcomes, policies that bake inequality into care. No names, no stories, no trophies. That's the work. I told her that. She stared long enough for the freight train to pass through the silence, then said, "Then why did you ask about my last name, my family?" I told her the truth I was embarrassed to say out loud. I was trying to understand how someone could change that fast and stick with it when no one was clapping. Curiosity, not collecting. She set the rumor down like it had burned her palms, then covered her face and said into her fingers, "I'm so tired of being the worst thing I did." Me too sometimes. You know what I mean. I won't pretend I didn't feel it. The shift from stranger to something else. We fought it. You should. We lost. Not in a Netflix way. No rainstorms or sweeping speeches. Just a quiet slide into honesty. She left Preston. Started therapy with Dr. Alana Price. Sold the car that looked like a yacht and bought a little sedan that didn't apologize for itself. There were bad days, rooms where people eyed her like a lit match, circles where she said the wrong thing and had to walk it back with her cheeks on fire. She stayed. Mini CTA, stick around, because what happened next will blow your mind. The night her parents came to talk sense into her, I brought takeout from Samara's kitchen. Injera lentils, greens. Comfort in a paper bag. Walking into her living room felt like stepping onto a stage with the wrong script. Her father's jaw could have cut rope. Her mother had that thin smile people wear when they're auditioning for tolerance. Preston stood by the window like he owned the skyline. They started with the greatest hits. "We gave you everything, we have a way of life, this isn't prejudice, it's reality, he's not suitable." Translation, fear with a fork and knife. Avery stood there, small and huge, and said slow and clear, "I choose him." She didn't look at me. She looked at herself. The door closed behind that family with a sound I still feel in my teeth. Justice doesn't always cheer. Sometimes it just gets very, very quiet. We learn to be a we the boring way. Groceries, budget towels living on the wrong shelf, apologies when tone outran intent. At the clinic, people watched. Some warmed, some stayed cold. A few were honest enough to say, "I'm waiting for you to slip." Fair. Forgiveness isn't a coupon. It's a payment plan with receipts. Avery built an outreach program with Dr. Price, circles for court-ordered volunteers that felt like work, not window dressing. She wrote grants at our kitchen table while I caught a nap between shifts. The board approved an expansion. The city floated a starter grant. She got hired full-time, not charity recognition. Then Hannah walked in. Hannah was 23 with spray paint under her nails and a jaw like a padlock. Judge sent her 6 months or county time choose. She came with a script. "It's not my fault, everybody's too sensitive, pride in my heritage, you know the buzzwords." Avery sat across from her, slid a photo of her old life across the table. White dress ring smiles that don't reach the eyes. And said I was you. Not as weapon as mirror. Week 3, Hannah bailed mid-circle. Week 5, she came back early and stacked chairs. Week 8, she apologized to the neighbors she'd hurt. Not online, on their porch. Week 12, I found her teaching a little boy in the waiting room how to build towers out of tongue depressors while his mama filled out forms. Do you think that's fair? That some people get a second chance and some don't? Tell me in the comments, because I wrestle with that. Life didn't turn into a montage. We got hate mail. One columnist called the clinic a redemption factory and me a moral exhibitionist. Cute. I wanted to clap back. My mother said, "Feed somebody who's hungry." We fed people. East Side Hope opened a second site on the West Side. Avery taught a workshop for hospital new hires about bias that didn't feel like a finger wag. Stories data role play that made people sweat and then breathe. I watched rooms thaw, one laugh at a time. We got married. It wasn't a redemption arc. It was 2 grown-ups picking each other after a lot of Tuesdays. Ethiopian food sheet cake, dance floor chaos, Thelma Briggs, out-dancing kids half her age. A year later, our daughter Hope, Thelma Reed, exploded into our mornings like confetti. Pancakes on Saturdays, syrup and hair coffee that somehow tastes better with a toddler giggling at the dog. Ordinary. That's the miracle nobody advertises. When Avery says late at night, "Do I deserve this?" I tell her what Dr. Price told both of us. Guilt can be a guardrail, not a prison. It keeps you attentive to the road. It doesn't lock your doors. And because stories don't wrap themselves, here's a scene that knocked the wind out of me not long ago. We got a call, rollover on the freeway, driver inbound bad. The doors banged open, EMTs talking that clipped language that makes everything urgent and manageable. I stepped in. The patient clocked my face and went rigid. "Not him," he said, eyes gone wide, mouth hard. It wasn't about me. It was about a story older than both of us. Elena's hand landed on my shoulder, our little signal. And I had a choice I'd already made 100 times. I nodded, stayed in the room, and did what needed doing. We saved him. He didn't thank me. On the way out, he stared at the floor like gratitude might break a rule. I went home and made breakfast for dinner. Sometimes you rebuild your spirit with scrambled eggs. One more wrinkle, because life loves a both and. On Hope's last birthday, Avery's parents mailed a gold-edged card with a photo of Avery at 5, gap-toothed, holding a balloon, and a note that said, "We trust you're well. No return address." First draft of me wanted to toss it. Second draft wanted to laminate it as evidence that stone can turn to flesh. We put it in a drawer. Avery stood there with her hand on the drawer like it was a pulse and said, "I don't need their permission to be okay." Then she went to make noodles because our kid is a carb gremlin. Do you think reconciliation is necessary for forgiveness? Or can letting go be a one-person job? So what's the point, Carter? What are we supposed to take from this, besides a lump in the throat and a comment queue? Maybe this most changes worth keeping happen off camera. In supply closets, car rides home from hard conversations, kitchens at midnight, where somebody finally says I was wrong and means it. Maybe grace and accountability aren't enemies if you keep your receipts. Maybe justice looks less like a speech and more like 1,000 unglamorous choices that add up to a different kind of person. And maybe, just maybe, the line between enabling and offering a hand isn't drawn in ink. It's drawn in how consistently somebody shows up after the apology when nobody's clapping. We're going to argue about this, and we should. Was I right to stay in that first room? Or did I reward bad behavior by giving my best to someone who had given me the worst of herself? When Avery said she chose me, was that courage or a betrayal of family? Or both? When Hannah got a second chance, did she earn it? Or did the system go soft? Because she finally cried in the right office, I don't have neat answers. I have a clinic that hums a marriage that is honest even when it is hard. A kid sticky with syrup who thinks pancakes fix everything, and a heart that is bigger than it was the night somebody tried to shrink me. That's what I've got. All right, your turn. Drop your take in the comments. Where do you draw the line between grace and enabling? What does real justice look like when harm is social and slow? Have you seen someone unlearn what raised them or had to do it yourself? If it were you, what would you have done in that ER? Be blunt, be kind, be specific. Like the video, if it moved, you share it with someone who needs a nudge toward better. And subscribe if you want more messy, true stories from a guy still figuring it out in rooms that beep. And if you disagree with all of it, pull up a chair. Let's talk where it counts.